Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee. I was talking to some people recently, and these folks were older than me, not a lot older than me, but 10, 12 years older than me. And we were discussing different aspects and different recollections of the Depression and World War II. And some of these stories I think are worth I guess sharing with you guys. When you start watching preparedness videos on YouTube and stuff and reading articles on it, the Depression gets thrown out a lot. It's a certain point of reference that a lot of preppers use to justify what they're doing and stuff. But there's certain aspects that I really haven't had, heard people discuss when they talk about the Depression. I mean, when some of the YouTube folks talk about the Depression, it's a lot of cookie cutter answers, and in my opinion, maybe parroting some stuff. The big thing that a lot of people, I guess I've never really heard a lot of people talk about during the Depression, is there was no money. There was no money. There wasn't money. There wasn't enough money in circulation. That was one of the big things with the Depression. The banks where people had their money closed, and the people couldn't get that money, so then that was all cash. So there was no money. There was no cash. There was no money in circulation, and that was one of the things that was most prevalent. My grandmother, she was 96 years old when she died in 2000. And she had a fair amount of firsthand knowledge of both the Depression and World War II. And I asked a lot of questions when I was younger about different aspects of that and stuff. And different aspects of the local area. And these people that I talked to, too, just recently here, they were all sort of the same thing. They got a lot of the same stories with some differences, but people just made their own stuff. You didn't go up to the store and buy something. You made it, or you repaired what you had. You, like a shirt, a button-up shirt, you wore that, and when it started getting holes in it, it got mended. And when it couldn't be mended anymore, it got too thin, the shirt went into the rag bag for mops or whatever, and the buttons got taken off the shirt and put in a big old quart can. I remember growing up, there were just quart cans upon quart cans at different auction sales and stuff, and that was all because of the old people. They saved all that stuff. You just didn't throw anything out. And getting to the financial aspect of it, where we are here, it already had been settled for a pretty significant period of time by the time the Depression rolled around. So most people's farms and stuff, they were paid for. I mean, there wasn't the debt back then that there is now. That wasn't the case out west, out in like Kansas and stuff. People were moving out there about the time that the Depression happened and slightly before that, and they were buying tracts of land and they were starting farms and stuff. So a lot of the foreclosures and stuff that you've seen out west, you didn't really see around here. But there wasn't a lot of lending and that kind of stuff going on. If lending took place, lending was between individuals. Lending was done from the more well-to-do would lend to the less well-to-do to buy things and to purchase property and farms and that kind of stuff. And if people had cash, that cash was saved for stuff that they couldn't make or they couldn't grow themselves. I guess the instance of this is you saved your money to pay your taxes, or you saved your money to buy kerosene. This was the kind of stuff because you couldn't make kerosene and you had to have something to pay the tax man when the tax man come around. So that was the stuff that what little bit of cash was out there. But then of course that cash wasn't out in circulation. People kept that cash. That wasn't spent. That wasn't moved around. And one thing in today's day and age, there's just so much waste. I mean, people throw food out, they throw this out, stops work, and they just throw it out. There was no throw out back then. I mean, I asked my grandmother that, and she said, you didn't throw nothing out. You used it. There was no such thing as throwing out food. If that food was still edible, somebody ate it. If you didn't eat it, the chickens ate it, or the hogs ate it. Whatever. Everything got used. There was no. I mean, if people from that era would come back now and see the amount of stuff that we throw out, they'd probably die of shock. But you didn't throw nothing out. Nothing really got wasted, and that was the recollections of these other folks as well. One lady that I talked to, they canned everything. When they butchered in the fall, they canned all their meat. And I said, you guys didn't have a smokehouse or anything? And she said, no, their farm wasn't big enough or whatever. They didn't have a smokehouse, where my grandparents, they had a smokehouse, so they would hang ham and bacon and stuff in the smokehouse, and sausage and whatnot. But she said they didn't. They canned it. They canned all their meat. So when they had meat through the winter, that was canned. There was you didn't have fresh meat. Everything was canned of one variety or another, except with the exception of maybe a chicken dinner on Sunday, where they would go out and butcher a chicken. Kind of black market stuff. There was a lot of alcohol cooked around here during Prohibition. Prohibition and the Depression kind of coincided, so a lot of people need money, they would start cooking illegal alcohol, and that was something that wasn't just limited to Appalachia, where they cooked shine and they run it into the cities. But there was a pretty fair amount of that took place in this area, and the local law enforcement at that time, they knew about it, because they knew that's people had to have make money somehow. They had to do something, So there was a lot of blind eye turning from the locals, and the federal agents that would come in every once in a while. Most of the local law enforcement, they would just tell the people that were cooking the shine, hey, you need to clean this up for a while and not do this for a little bit, because there's going to be some people coming around. And it was that kind of word of mouth that took place. And this black market, this kind of went into World War II as well. And I remember asking my grandmother, what was the worst times that you could remember? And without a doubt, she answered the first couple years of World War II, because the Depression was still kind of there. But then you couldn't find anything. It didn't matter whether you had money or not, because they were taking everything for the war effort. So if you needed a tire for a piece of farm equipment or something, or you needed something that was harder to come by, you didn't get it. You had to find people that had connections in the black market, and that's all how that operated. And those were things that. Those are kind of things that people don't talk about when they talk about it in modern preparedness. Pretty much everything was black market. People talk about bartering and whatnot. There was a certain amount of bartering that took place in between farms, but it's not like what we think of today as bartering when we're on YouTube or whatever, watching preparedness videos. People didn't have just a whole bunch of stuff stockpiled, and then they would, I'm going to go trade this with so-and-so or whatever. It was basically stuff that they produced, and they would trade it to other people for stuff that they produced, or, skills and stuff. A lot of doctoring that took place was done by barter. You didn't pay the doctor money. You gave him a ham or whatever that it was. There was a lot of that stuff that took place too. So, and cities weren't immune to this. There's another story that I was told by somebody that I know. They grew up in one of the larger cities around here at the time, and the husband was still fortunate enough to have work, so he would go off to work, and the wife would do what she could to secure food during the day. And one of the things that she would do is people that had, fruit trees and orchards and stuff, and this stuff was kind of common even in the city back then. People might have 3-4 fruit trees in their yard and a garden. And she would find out, and she would ask these people, hey, the apples that are falling on the ground that you don't want or whatever, can I have those? And most people would let let her go ahead and take them. So she would take a little red pull behind wagon, put the kid in it, or kids, depending on the time that we're talking about, and they would walk 3 miles one way to get a couple of pails of apples that she would bring back to the house, peel them, cook them down into applesauce, and can them. That's the reality of the Depression from the people that I've talked to. There were other people that I talked to where they lived in the city, but then they had work out in the country, like at the farm or whatever. So they would, 5 miles or so out, they would either ride a bicycle or, they would catch a ride from somebody, and they would go out and they would work on the farms that were kind of encircling the cities at the time. And they would take produce from those farms. They would give them produce because, the farmers didn't always have money to pay them cash anyway. So there was a lot of that went on. So, there was then the women, they would find ways to utilize all this stuff. That's why you look in Depression era cookbooks, you see stuff like vinegar pie, because they could only do with what they had. And that's something that's in modern preparedness, everybody kind of thinks, well, I'm just going to stockpile everything that I need and then I can just coast through whatever it is. But it wasn't like that back then. It wasn't like that at all back then, because the Depression went on for over 10 years. So you'd have to have a hell of a big warehouse and a lot of resources to stockpile everything that you're going to need for 10 years. So then that's where it comes in. You got to be resourceful to kind of keep going along. But I thought some of these stories were worth sharing. I think there's lessons to be learned. I mean, especially with the financial and how people fixed things, and how people made everything themselves, and that's like the lending of money and stuff. That was all done in between people more so than from any type of financial institution. And some of that money too, it took years for people to pay it back, but most people paid that money back. I mean, it maybe took them 15, 20 years to pay some of that money back, even small loans, but it was a different era back then. People just, they did that, they remembered that, and they went on. But anyway, I wanted to share this with you guys. Hope you guys got a little information, a little entertainment out of this. Just sharing some local stories here and some of my recollections of some of the first-hand accounts that I talked to folks about their experiences during the Depression. Anyway, this is Modern Refugee. You guys take care.